I guess that's the way you pick up chicks on the North Shore, huh? You just charge the gnarliest barrels and then it just comes to you, huh?
Don't outrun the wave. Stay behind it and attack it from the back. I was like, that guy's 100% dead. Like.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Basis Surf Podcast. We have my good friend Joey Trisolini here, who is a surf photographer and filmer. He's worked with top CT pros, free surfers. Also used to live in New York as a professional fashion and editorial photographer and filmer. He still does that, working, with likes of Milk Studios, shooting people like Gisele Bundchen, and originally spent his childhood in the North Shore of Hawaii, actually, and has just returned back a couple years ago and is back living in Hawaii. So thanks for coming on and joining us. The first question I actually had to ask you, Joey, was, what does it feel like to be on a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific when the world's biggest volcano erupts in your backyard, basically?
Yeah, it's pretty insane. Just to see the power and the sheer, magnitude of it all. And it's just like a couple miles that way. It's pretty weird to just be like, oh, I'll just hop on the computer as some lava is rolling down this hill.
That sounds so gnarly. I mean, aren't there houses that have been taken out by that lava, like, not too far away? It's a serious risk down there, right? Isn't it?
So far it's not too bad. It might take out the road at some point, and then just slowly make its way. Right now, there's no houses in the general direction of where it's going, but if it goes the other way, then it's pretty bad news.
Oh, no. Well, as long as that lava doesn't take out the road to the surf breaks, and you're good, right? Everything's going to be fine.
That's why everybody's got a 4x4 on the Big Island.
Just roll over that molten lava. Just do whatever you need to do to get there. Nice. Oh, cool. Well, I thought that to start off this podcast, we'd actually talk a little bit about your book, which is amazing. I have it right here. I got a copy of it a long time ago. This is... It's called Pipe, Tales from the 7 Mile Miracle. It's a book that you put out a couple years ago. And I thought it would be pretty cool, actually, to start off with, because there's this little postcard you put at the very front of it,
yeah.
And you write some lines. And I love, because it really just brings me into that world. And I thought we might have you read the first 3 paragraphs from it. And
all right.
All these amazing pro surfers in here, but I think this is just what sets it off for me. So why don't you start with that?
Yeah. Okay, here we go. When I was a kid, the North Shore was a really scary place. Kamehameha Highway was silent after 8 p.m. The only thing you would hear were the waves pounding the reef at Pipe, or some howlies getting pounded in someone's backyard. Not only did you hear the waves pounding, you also felt them. This was the late 90s, early 2000s. Andy Irons was king, and Pipeline was under strict local regulation. You've probably heard all the stories, and they're most likely true. My mom once cut Sonny Garcia's hair before he went to jail for tax evasion. My brother once got handed a Dahui sticker out of a random van while we were waiting for the bus. I always felt that we were on the fringe of being accepted. Maybe we weren't just some haoles from Ka'aava. I moved away from Hawaii 10 years ago and found a new love for surfing. It brought me back home to reconnect with the ocean. My camera helped me connect with the community I was so intimidated by. This ongoing project is an effort to reach out. I want to preserve the names and faces of the North Shore. Let's talk story.
Yeah, that really brings me back. I'm trying to imagine what it was like for a young little Joey Trisolini running around the North Shore. Must have been a pretty wild and woolly place.
Yeah, it was scary.
I'm sure it was.
Full on scary.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely have to get into some stories of that at some point. But before we get into that, actually, I wanted to. There's this amazing spread here. You can see you got Kelly Slater and him catching this insane wave. I feel like it's such an interesting moment when you capture this photo of Kelly, and that is an amazing wave at Pipe. Could you tell us a little bit about that moment? What was going on with Kelly? Any experiences you've had with him? Maybe that particular wave?
Yeah, I think that photo was in between heats with Kelly. And he's just such an interesting person to watch. Um, he's just so tuned in all the time. Um, and I feel like you can tell he's considering everything and everyone around him. Where I feel like a lot of guys, especially when you're that popular, um, they just kind of shut it all out and they just like get into their zone. I feel like Kelly has this like eighth sense where he can just still take in all that stimulus of just everyone watching him, everyone like doing stuff, and he still can focus and do his job. So it's cool to see. It's just really interesting. You can just see him like always analyzing stuff, and I think that's what's kept him. I wonder if he found that throughout his career somewhere, if that's something he always had, because you see a lot of other guys kind of crumble under that pressure or have to shut everything out. You know, it's nuts when everyone's looking at you and you're going out surfing 20-foot waves.
Yeah, so much pressure, so much consequence. That is a ton. And I remember last winter when we were both at the Pipe Masters, and we saw him win the Pipe Masters. He beat Seth Muniz. That was probably one of the greatest sporting moments in history, and we were like on the beach to watch that.
It's pretty cool.
And
I got chicken skin. Yeah.
I was just so psycho to watch that happen, right? I mean, the guy was just literally summoning waves. I can't even imagine trying to be out there with all that pressure, especially after kind of the, you know, he's been struggling the past couple of years, and to come back and win the Pipe Masters like that is just super wild.
Yeah, totally.
It has to take a certain level of just next level determination and self-belief to come back at that age after everything you've gone through and everybody beginning to doubt you. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I mean, after he hurt his foot in at Jeffries, I was like, I don't know how you come back from that and compete at that high level. I mean, I'm 35 and I just hurt my shoulder a little bit, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I'm ever gonna paddle like into some of the waves that I want to anymore. I don't know. Maybe that's it for me.
I think you just need to look at Kelly and just realize you're being a little wuss and just suck it up and get out there. Oh man, that's so crazy. Yeah. Kelly's obviously a very interesting character. There's this other photo that I think is really captivating and interesting. I think it's Connor Coffin just dropping off the lift, like just free diving. Looks like he's about to just eat some gnarly. He's about to get a beating. What was the? I think that's Matt. That's Matt Wilkinson, right?
Yeah.
What? I think I remember watching this heat. I mean, but for me, it just happened when I was watching it. I think it just happened in the blink of an eye. But it must be a different thing for you to watch it from shore, you know, and be right there. What was that like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's the weird thing about seeing these moments live. Sometimes they don't stick at all. Like sometimes you'll see on the video replay some technical barrel that is insane, but in real life you're on the beach and it just goes by really fast and it doesn't really click. And then sometimes it's the opposite effect, like something that you'd totally just breeze past on the pod or the webcast. In real life you're like, oh my god, that was like an insane moment. I don't know, that photo is kind of special to me because my interest in surf, just when I was a little kid, kind of the biggest moment burned into my brain about surfing when I was a kid was when we cut school to go watch the Eddy in 2004, I think it was. And we were standing, you know, on the cliff, and I remember like the only thing I remember two things. I remember Bruce's wave, and then I remember Flea jumping from the top to the bottom, and it ended up being an Eddy poster a year or two later. But I thought I was like, that guy's 100% dead. Like, I was like, there's no way he's coming back up from that. He jumped 40 feet from the top of a giant wave to the
No way.
bottom. And it was like that photo,
Yeah.
but at Waimea.
Except
And
twice as big.
yeah, and this is all pre-flotation and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, that moment for me was like one of the most important memories of my whole childhood.
Wow, that's such a interesting memory. And so you were up on the cliff when that happened. It's
Hmm.
and it's always so deceiving too, because like I've been on that cliff looking at Waimea. I remember I think I might have been with you or Aaron or somebody, and I
Hmm.
was looking at it, I was like, that almost looks surfable, but of course it's like way bigger than it actually looks like from shore. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's funny. But so this photo, there's this photo of Connor,
Uh-huh.
but then there's this other photo which I think is Connor.
Yeah.
And he just looks like he is having the worst day of his life, or he's having the best day of his life. I can't figure it out, but there's this photo right here.
Oh
It
yeah,
looks
it's
like,
coming back up for air.
15 feet of whitewater. Yeah, that looks pretty gnarly. What was the story behind that one right there?
Yeah, I know. I got two photos of Connor getting smoked, which kind of sucks, poor guy. But I mean, he charges. That's the thing. Like, that photo's really kind of. I mean, the whole scenario around that second photo is kind of funny because, um, well, I should tell the story a little bit about the first one too. I mean, the thing is, during the contest, when you have to go. There's no like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna try and like, if it's a priority thing, you have to go. It's like those guys have to take off on psycho waves, like, and you really don't have an option to back out. You'll get like, it's probably worse to back out than get hospitalized. I don't know, at least for your ego, maybe. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, like, that situation those guys are in. But yeah, that second one, I didn't know who it was at first too. He just like, it was like one of the scariest waves I saw that winter. I don't know. It was really big, really kind of nasty, and yeah, he just got fully pounded. But kind of the silver lining in that whole thing was he got back to the beach and some girl, like some super cute girl, came up to him and tried to get his number. So I mean, hey, it all works out.
Yeah, I guess he got a little reward for that beatdown. I mean, it made it all worth it.
Yeah.
I guess that's the way you pick up chicks on the North Shore, huh? You just charge the gnarliest barrels, and then it just comes to you, huh?
Might work 1 out of 10, 1 out of 100.
Either that, or you just break your face, and you'll never get a chick again. So
Yeah.
there's a little risk and reward there. Who knows?
Yeah.
What about this photo here of Gabby? You caught him at this moment. He looks so pensive.
Hmm.
What was the story behind this one?
Yeah. I mean, Gabby's a really interesting guy. I think that photo is maybe 2017 or so. And he was, at the height of his uber focused one goal, one mission type of scenario. But I think he lost early that year. Um, Maybe, I mean, he might have made it to quarters or something, but for him, that's not that good. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, when Pipe was in that December window, before the WSL changed it, a lot of it is in more northerly swell direction. So it's a lot of backdoor waves, which Gabby's not super good at getting barreled on his backhand, even though he did get like a random nine. But I don't know. I didn't really like that wave, but I would have liked to surf it maybe. I don't know. But yeah, that being said, yeah, I feel like he's evolved so much as a person. Just I don't know. I mean, I don't know him personally, but just seeing his interactions with his team and stuff, you're just like, man, it's. I think it's so much harder to be a psycho competitor when you have to be, and then be able to turn it off and just be a nice, decent guy. It's like really hard to change between those two modes.
Hmm.
Um, so I think the guys that we kind of all villainize are like these real eager go-getter guys. And they're just, they can't switch out of that mode so easy because it's easier for them to compete if they're, and then you see it in other sports like F1, especially in F1.
Or Michael Jordan. Sounds like he was
Yeah.
always on
Oh, yeah.
full on psycho mode, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's being a professional athlete, I think you expect him to be a nice guy, but you also expect him to like win. It's like these guys are in a really hard place to try and make that happen all the time.
Right. Juggling both kind of aspects at the same time, that would be tough. Huh. Okay. And so you shot this while you were still living in New York, right? And I think you just went back for a couple winters and you would shoot that periodically.
Yeah.
And so this was when you were still living in New York City. You're still, primarily doing fashion and editorial work, right? So this, when you made this, was the intention for you at that point to, break into, surf photography, or was this more of a passion project type of thing that you were trying to create?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I was assisting a bunch at that point in my career, and I was assisting a lot of high-level photographers, and that's like where that Giselle job was. I was assisting my buddy Kevin O'Brien, who's an amazing photographer and an amazing mentor to me. So I had gotten to see that side of it and those different levels of it, and I kind of just wanted to pave my own way. And I was looking at surf photography, and I was like, well, I don't really fit into like just real flat, F16, everything sharp kind of surf photography. I kind of wanted to do it a little weirder and bring some of that influence over from stuff I'd seen in fashion. Just wanted to be a little bit different. So yeah, looking at this book now, I'm like, man, I was like really just doing different things. But a lot of it's like super out of focus and stuff like that.
But I think the results.
But it's cool. Like I still feel good about it. It feels like it feels very different from kind of what I do even now, but in a good way.
Well, I mean, this one photo you took of John,
I
think is such a special photo. And this is totally unlike anything you would ever see in a normal surf mag, or, I can definitely see where you took those principles of what you learned in kind of the fashion world and applied it to the surf world, right? It's really beautiful.
Thanks.
And for those of you, to describe it, it's like everything is in soft focus. You can see John's face, but then there's this single bead of water just like about to drip from one of his locks of hair. He probably just got out of the water at pipe, and I don't know, it's this special moment.
Yeah, that's exactly what the setup was. It was cool to come into it with a different idea of how I wanted to portray it. And just for me, it's like I just wanted to have the feeling of being there. Like it didn't have to be like as descriptive in a literal way. Like, oh, I don't have to see exactly, every sticker on the board of every pro, it's not selling anything. It's just, just that feeling and just kind of like even the cover, like the wave it took me a long time to figure out this is actually Barramamia. But everything's pretty soft, and it's just like that offshore and just like the depth of the blue and stuff reminds me of just how humbling it is to see these waves and to be part of this whole thing.
No, I just love his style right there.
Yeah, coming out of the barrel.
The way he looks. Yeah. It's very like I see a lot of like skate style in that right there as well. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So when you did this book, you this was just like your initial foray. It's a passion project. You weren't fully, shooting a lot of spending lots of time shooting, right?
Yeah.
And so how hard was it then to actually go through that process of like, meeting up with people to actually shoot for them? I mean, So
Oh,
for
super
anybody
hard.
that's that's getting into surf photography, what was that process
Hmm.
like of getting your foot in the door and then meeting with people so you could shoot them?
Yeah, I mean it's super hard, and you're always trying to get more access, and you're always the thing is you just have to be there, like more than anything else. You have to know where the waves are going to be, and you have to, like, if you're a really good forecaster, you can be an excellent surf photographer because you're like, that's the angle, that's the wind, like that's where those guys are going to be 100% because everyone's kind of always on the same page too. Um, but yeah, I mean, the hard thing is, I mean, North Shore on in the winter, you're going to run into a bunch of guys kind of no matter what. But early on, I would be like, "Oh wow, the forecast looks huge. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna get down there early." And then I get down there, and it's just like everything's unsurfable. Like third reef pipe maybe, and
Hmm.
maybe Waimea. But you kind of just learn like, okay, there is like a size for each spot that's ideal, um, and then after that, you just got to be around. That's the trick, I
Right.
guess, as a photographer.
Just got to pay your dues, put the time in, and you'll get your opportunities. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you shot the book, and then I kind of remember. I think we had just done our trip to Portugal,
Hmm.
and I don't remember the sequence of things, but the sequence and chronology in my mind, anyway, is we went on that crazy trip to Portugal. We saw like 70-foot Nazare. Then you go to Tahiti, and then
Uh-huh.
next thing I know, you're moving. You're like, I'm moving back to I'm moving back to
I moved back
Hawaii.
to Hawaii.
And then
Yeah.
I'm also gonna go surf J Bay in South Australia while I'm at it. I'm like, dude, this guy's on a full on surf bender right now. Is my main impression
Uh-huh.
that I got from that.
It's from my good years.
So you moved back to Big Island, and that's when you began to more closely work with a pro surfer, free surfer Cliff Capono. And that was really interesting. So could you tell us more about that whole process? How did you even start to begin to shoot him, and maybe some of the adventures you might have gone on with him as you were following around, shooting around the island?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's kind of we never knew we were gonna move back so soon. My wife and I were like pretty busy and everything was going pretty well in New York. And then when the pandemic hit, we had already got a house out here, kind of as a long-term thing. And um, yeah, so we moved out here during the pandemic, started working on the house, and there was so much stuff to do. And I was getting to surf a lot, and we had a really good season that year. So I was just down at the beach. Like I would try and get down there at like 7 or 6, and then surf for like 3 hours, and then come back and work on the house. And I started running into Cliff, and he was friends with some of my friends. So he was looking for a filmer for that winter, and I was like, yeah, dude, I'm super down. There's no like commercial work for me. Like everyone's too afraid to like get more than 10 people together to shoot anything. So I have I either have to work on this house full time, or I'd love to shoot you as well. Yeah, it just kind of grew organically that way, and we're kind of a similar age. And I actually remember him vaguely going to UH with me around the same time. So it's just like it's pretty cool, like all these things coming back together. And yeah, I mean he charges, so it was nice to push myself, shooting more in the water and bigger waves, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And my understanding of the Big Island is, there are a few established spots, at least on Hilo side,
Yeah,
but there's not a ton more than that. So a lot of those other spots are like these misto spots. What was it like shooting these spots? I mean, are they super treacherous, or because
hmm,
when I think of Big Island, I think of like very young island, like jagged
yeah,
lava. That's what I think.
totally.
Um,
You're
and
100% correct. Yeah,
I just
it's
remember being on Kona side. I remember being
mhm.
on Kona side and just going to see the manta rays and just looking at the shore, and it was just like there's people surfing over there. It just looks so dangerous. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's
Totally.
just, I mean, I'm not sure if you were surfing on Kona side, but like, yeah, it's pretty gnarly area, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's very fickle, and I mean, you'll drive 3 hours, and then you'll show up, and the wind will either be bad or the angle is just a little bit off. Um, yeah, it's tough to forecast, and you just never know. You if there's not that many spots, and it's all like a hike to get to anything, so it's you kind of make up your mind and go for it, and hope you get lucky.
Hmm.
But otherwise, I mean, you just fly to Oahu, and you're like, okay, Southwest, I'm gonna be down,
Right, right, right,
at
right.
Bowls or something.
So did you, I mean, I'm assuming though there were times that you did proper score and those days made
Hmm.
it worth it, right? What were some of the I guess any specific waves, not in terms of naming any waves, but like any specific instances or like experiences or adventures that you had shooting with him?
Hmm.
Maybe you mentioned getting in the water, shooting more from the water. What was that like?
Yeah, we got really lucky. We had a really big north a few years ago, um, and yeah, it like opened up a spot that sleeps pretty much 364 days out of the year. Maybe 365
Hmm.
because it takes a couple of years for it to really do its thing, at that
Yeah.
level. And yeah, it's amazing. Like just seeing it feels so pure, you don't see a bunch of guys paddling around, and it's just you and nature, really. You're just watching, like, that's like I try and imagine pipeline empty, because there's always somebody out there if it's, big and perfect. But you don't really get to see that ever. If it's a
Right.
contest, there's so many people on shore, and I can imagine like those guys in, the 50s looking out and just being like, wow, that is like amazing. Like
Yeah.
I feel like we've seen that wave so much now. We see it every winter, like a ton, that you get numb to it, but to like, just see it on a blank canvas would be like really, really amazing.
Yeah.
So that's
Wow.
kind of cool. Like some of the swells, if we get really, really lucky here, you'll kind of get that moment where you're like, wow, this is a beautiful connection.
You're just out there, barely anybody out. Just feels
Hmm.
kind of like experiencing like this, I don't know, this magical place. That sounds great.
Yeah,
Wow.
totally. But mega treacherous too, because a lot of stuff you just don't know about. Like you're like, don't
Hmm.
really know if there's a rock there, or, at this size, if you can paddle in or out from there. It's like everything changes a lot.
Hey everyone, it's Van. Hopefully, you've been enjoying the podcast. Hopefully, you've been listening to some good stories, getting some good tips that are helping you improve as a surfer. If so, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review. It'll only take you literally a few seconds, and share it with your friends. That's the best way you can support me so I can continue to create awesome new content for you. So, thanks. Did you ever get yourself into any hairy situations shooting in the water for him?
Yeah, there was like two that I remember where I just got sent back to the beach. There was just no way. It was a big beach break, and it was just too long period, and it was just treacherous. Like, and it wasn't clean. It wasn't like, really, it was just a shit fight to get out there. But yeah, like I just got flattened like to the bottom, like maybe 4 or 5 times in a row, trying to swim out one arm with my camera, and I was just like,
Oh, right.
this is so shitty. Um, and it was super humbling. I was like so eager to get in there, and like I was like, oh wow, if we're gonna, we might get some really beautiful barrel shots or something.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I just got flattened out like a couple times in a row, and I was just like, okay, like lesson learned. Like 15 seconds at this spot, at like 10 feet or whatever it was, is just not really gonna let you do that. Or I just got to be way better of a swimmer.
But you have to swim with just one hand?
Yeah, with the camera, you just got one hand, and then you can kick.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man, that sounds
And then the other
impossible.
time was this really sketchy reef that luckily I didn't make it out because who knows? I don't know. By the time you actually get to where it breaks, it just breaks straight up on this dry slab. So it's like, and I had like a boogie board, and I was just like, man, I'm just gonna just might get killed here. Um,
Oh my god.
but it's yeah, I get humbled by the ocean all the time. It's good, and it's a good learning experience, and you just learn a lot and relearn your limits kind of every day.
I mean, because if you're was that spot like a barrel that you were trying to shoot the
Yeah,
slab?
all barrels all the time. Yeah, and it would
So
have
you're
been
basically
cool.
like sticking your arm out. You're basically like sticking your arm out into the barrel, but like if you mess up, you're gonna just get sucked over the lip into that dry slab. Basically, is what's gonna happen
Well,
if you mess
I
it up.
thought, I mean, my whole plan was okay. I'm gonna kind of be on the shoulder, shoot at a little longer lens, and just shoot right into it. Should be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, with
Right.
how the water moves out there, it doesn't really allow you to sit there. It either pulls you right into the impact zone, or it pushes you way down the coast with another current. So you're always just learning new things about different spots at different sizes.
This spot sucks you from the shoulder. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it either pushes you out, or it kind of wanted to pull you into the, because it's on such a dry slab, so it just the water. If you're kind of sitting in the spot where you want to shoot, you either got to be probably better without a bodyboard. You either got to be kicking back out or something the whole time, kind of fighting against it, because it'll want to pull you right across the shelf and into the wave.
That sounds like the worst kind of wave to surf because like you catch a wave, you eat it, and then you're just getting sucked back into the impact zone. So it's like a washing
Oh
machine.
yeah,
Oh my god.
yeah, yeah, pure torture.
Oh my god, that sounds awful, dude. Well, so having spent so much time watching him, I mean, he's such a stylish surfer. Like I love his style. I remember watching him
Hmm.
and just he has the smoothest style. He's not waving his arms everywhere. He's tucking that back knee. I mean, and he's doing gnarly. He's threading these gnarly barrels. Like,
Hmm.
was there anything from watching him that you've been able to apply to your surfing personally?
Not really anything at all. um, but I would say, if anything, I mean, just kind of, what have I learned? I don't know. Yeah, he just has his own way of surfing. Um, I just do the opposite of all of that. I just flail around a lot and try and do real aggressive skate turn stuff.
Uh huh.
Yeah, we're different creatures, but yeah, it's I think maybe if anything I learned anything from his surfing would be just to slow everything down a little bit more if possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just not think about trying to rip the wave to pieces. That being said, I'll
Mm-hmm.
probably be out today later just fucking trying to go as aggressive as I can. But
That's the
slowing
skateboard
everything
right there.
down, yeah,
Right.
and just being on the right waves really makes everything look better.
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So Cliff is a free surfer, and
Hmm.
I know back in the day there was like this huge. I mean, everybody wanted to be a free surfer, right? It's like you, unless you, yeah, especially if you didn't like competition, but you basically surf great waves. You don't have to compete in small, tiny, crappy conditions. You fly
Hmm.
around the world, and you get to, your goal was to get a couple cover shots and get in the surf mags. That was the way it worked back then. But
Hmm.
I would have to imagine things have changed. Like how, I mean, the landscape is drastically different. But I'm curious from your perspective now, working in it. What is it like being a photographer working with free surfers, and what's it like for the free surfers themselves in this current day and age of, content creation and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's the probably the one of the biggest things to think about as a free surfer. You're almost probably thinking about that more than you're actually thinking about surfing, or at least the successful ones are, because nowadays you're expected to build your own brand and you have to be the content creator for your own brand. You have to be the creative director for your own brand, and the brand is yourself, you know. So the hardest thing for those guys is getting enough budget to afford a filmer to have them, you know, on staff, or you just really hope you can link up with guys enough on swells to get clips to keep that going, or you figure out how to pay for it. But it's super important. It's like the most integral part of the job now, and companies have been bought up pretty much. Majority of them are owned by big corporations that don't sign these big contracts to surfers anymore. So it's all about kind of building your own brand, and to do that, you usually need a filmer and well, usually just a filmer these days. No one really needs a photographer even almost anymore, to get that content out there.
Interesting. And that's I mean, when I look at Cliff, like, he definitely has his own brand. He's a scientist, right? He's a PhD. He's native Hawaiian, and so he definitely has his own story. But this was probably a mixture of both natural, because that's just who he is, but then also this intentional way of marketing himself. And so that's probably something a free surfer needs to think about as they're, you know, especially if you're a younger free surfer and you're trying to figure out who your identity is and what your brand is, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like, you know, if you're a 16-year-old kid that rips, you could put a clip up of you doing, you know, a double backflip in a pool and stuff. But unless, you know, you have a little bit of a story behind it, not too many people are going to care for very long. So I feel really bad for those guys, because it's, you know, they've probably been, you know, pushed on by their parents a lot of times to be like, oh yeah, you're going to make a bunch of money as this surfer. You're going to sign this big contract. And really what it comes down to is like, man, these guys got to work so hard to make any money, and they got to make their brand to reach into other pockets of funding. Like, it's probably not going to come from, you know, the surf companies. It's probably going to come from, I don't know, some weird different avenues. And you just see more and more of that. Yeah, it's tricky. It's almost like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, how you like, you got to create this brand, but you need money to make this brand. So
that's what I was just about to say, right? Because you need followers in order for the brands to recognize you. But to get the followers, you have to create the content, and to create the content, you need the money. But to get the money, you need the brand. So it's like, yeah, you're just stuck in this loop.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't really know what the path forward is for a lot of these guys. I mean, and it's kind of the same paradox with surf filming and surf photography. Like, having a real stable client that's like, okay, we're going to be able to pay this guy through a couple of seasons. It's just really rare. So yeah, you always got to be thinking about, okay, like, what are my skills? How can I use them in other scenarios or something? So yeah, shooting fashion in water or something like that can help you kind of, I don't know, fill the dates in your calendar.
And that's how you do it, right? You continue to shoot a lot of stuff that's not surfing related, and surfing is one of the things you do, but it's definitely not the only thing you do, right?
For sure. Yeah. I think trying to just stay balanced in that whole thing has been pretty integral. And it's hard. I mean, you know, you're always, people kind of want to pigeonhole you, and sometimes it makes it easier for you to get work in certain ways. If they're like, oh yeah, that guy's the good beach filmer, that guy's the good water photographer, that guy's the fashion editorial guy. Getting put in those little boxes can get you a lot of work sometimes in those little spheres, but you kind of want to be known as the guy that just kind of does, I guess, a lot of things. I don't know. Or just be really, really good at one thing.
Hmm. Like specialize or be jack of all trades. I mean,
Yeah,
sounds
it's
yeah.
tough. Yeah, it's a weird, I don't know. I never have it figured out. I'm just always trying to pedal some water around.
So it sounds like trying to make it as a surf photographer is as challenging as trying to make it as a free surfer nowadays. It's a tough profession as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to get paid consistently is tricky, and yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of brands get stuff for free, and a lot of surfers get photos for free. So it's this kind of cycle that feeds on itself. So it's important to have a
Hmm.
wider client base.
All right, so you were working with Cliff for a while, and now it seems like you're shooting a lot. You're spending a lot more time on the North Shore shooting kind of those top tier, top five CT surfers. What's it been like shooting them? I mean, whenever I talk to you, you're like, I just spent like basically a month at Pipe, shooting
Yeah,
continuously. What is that? What has that process been like?
yeah. Last winter was really busy. It's cool. I mean, those guys operate on just such a different level, and it really is like athletics at its finest. And um, seeing them pretty much all together on the North Shore every year, it's cool. You can really pick apart their different styles and how they approach waves, and um, it really becomes more obvious who's in that top five. Like it's not like sometimes you just go out and you see a bunch of good surfers and you're like, oh wow, everyone's just really good. But when those guys are out, you're like, okay, there's everybody, and then there's like those guys, and
Mm.
it really is like it's a world of difference seeing those guys surf with even other good pros, and it must be just like so mentally difficult for guys coming up that are you know out at Pipe with those top guys, or out at a couple of different spots where it's really apparent who's better.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, must be really difficult to like be like, okay, I'm gonna enter this contest and I'm gonna beat those guys. Where like the whole week previous, you're just getting absolutely smoked by these guys, and watching them like take some wave from way out the back and just destroy it.
Is it like, I mean, especially at a wave like Pipe, the biggest thing must be just the wave selection, right? Like just picking the right
Hmm.
wave, getting the deepest barrel. Is that it, or are you also talking about like maneuvers, airs that they're doing at the end of that barrel section, or what?
Yeah, it's just like it's honestly it's just like comfort. Like pipe's actually kind of hard because so much of it's just like people sometimes get lucky with random waves. It's that wave changes so much. It's so hard to be like, okay, that's going to be a good one or something like that. Like sometimes, who was it? It was Crosby Colapinto last winter got like a bunch of really good waves, and he wasn't getting the best waves, but he just got kind of lucky on like, and he was really brave to jump in on a couple waves that worked out for him because that reef is just so um, it's just such a roll of the dice most of the time.
Right. I mean, the old kind of adage or whatever story is that like if you're coming up at Pipe in the pecking order, and I'm assuming that Crosby, he's not well established in that pecking order, right? You're just
Hmm.
sitting kind of on the inside and going for the closeouts, and then sometimes you get lucky and you make one of them, right?
Hmm.
Were those the waves that he was getting, or
I don't know. I didn't see a lot of like a lot of the waves he caught like in real life. I don't really know where he
right?
was moving around, but I mean none of the top guys wanted him, so he must have just been just in on really scary parts of the reef that you don't want to sit on most of the time.
Well, why don't you do this? Describe to me for the normal everyday surfer what it's like to watch Pipe, to look at that
Mm,
lineup and to see those heavy waves go down. I'm not sure how many people have had the pleasure and the experience of seeing pipe working, but it is pretty wild. But how would you describe it to someone who's never seen it?
I mean, I think a lot of people have done a really good job describing it as just like you feel like you're in the like the Coliseum, like it's the Hawaiian version of the Coliseum, like the waves right there, and it's just breaking so hard on that piece of reef. And it's a wild card, like some of the waves you think, oh, that one's gonna work out, it just like totally shuts down, or you know. So I think that's what keeps it really interesting, and also makes it super, super dangerous. There's other waves that run, reefs like Tahiti, and I mean, Cloudbreak, I guess. I don't really know enough about Cloudbreak to talk about it in depth, but it's a little bit more consistent. I mean, at least Tahiti's like, okay, so mechanical. This is what you're going to get. Whereas Pipeline just does weird stuff all the time.
How often do you
Um,
see guys get heavily injured out there?
all the time. All the time. And it doesn't even have to be the biggest day. Like when Dusty Payne got hurt, I was just on the beach shooting some photos the day before, and it was just kind of like smaller in between swells kind of stuff. And he got hurt on one of those days. It wasn't even like a maxing day. Like it's just a really, yeah, it really is dangerous. Like as many times as people say, "Oh, this is a dangerous wave," it's like not even enough. Like it's
Yeah,
dangerous when it's freaking 4 feet. It's dangerous when it's.
right,
So
right.
yeah, and I mean, and it's the like now it's or it has been, for as long as I've been alive, like the proving ground for you got to get your clips there in the winter. You gotta. So it's crazy, man. It's a crazy wave. It's
And then you got 100 people all frothing for the same wave, so the most hectic lineup in the world. Just adding all to that, it must be pretty wild.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Any other sessions that are memorable to you shooting on the North Shore with any of these pros that you've been working with?
Um, during the Triple Crown period of the last winter, you would see, since they've changed the format to just submitting video clips for the Triple Crown, you'd see all the top guys at all the same spots at almost all the same times, which had to be extremely frustrating. Like, imagine if you wanted to go surfing and it's like the best conditions all year, and you're like, here I go. I'm going to go get my clip at Haleiwa. And second you paddle out, 12 other of like the gnarliest competitors like paddle out right behind you and probably catch up to you. And then you're sitting,
Oh
right
no.
next to each other. And that's like kind of how that window goes for those guys. And it's almost like a curse. Like you touch the water and then like 12 guys that, want the same wave as you jump out there. So yeah, last winter, seeing that happen was nuts. I mean, we shot John out there during that Haleiwa, one of the better days at Haleiwa, and yeah, he was out there for 6 hours, and like paddling against that current when it's that big is almost more of a feat than even catching a wave. Like it's the endurance to be out there that long is insane, and obviously just like competing the whole time and catching. He caught quite a bit of waves, and they were all pretty insane. Um, but it's like for these guys, you have those days. There's going to be a handful of days, and it's going to be like that's the day. Like I need to be 100% there, focused, right equipment, and you just can't mess up a section, like especially
Mm.
Haleiwa. Like you kind of draw something out too far, or you skip some of it or something. Like it's really about reading the wave,
Mm.
and that was really apparent in that session. Like you see somebody like John go out there, and you're just like, wow, this is a master class just in reading the wave. I don't even care like you I don't even care what kind of turn or what kind of spray I look like. Just that he's just so in sync with that wave, and that was
Mm.
the most impressive thing for me.
Wow. Wow, that sounds wild. Just paddling for 6 hours
Yeah, against
and reading that
raging
way.
current.
Yeah.
Yeah,
His paddle power must be insane. I mean,
yeah,
that must be so cool for John to be able to, go out and surf that wave and then immediately see footage of how he performed. And that feedback session, that feedback loop of being able to surf and then being able to see your footage must be really informative. How do the pros use their footage? You know, are they? I mean, because let's just be honest, as an everyday surfer, when you see your own footage, most of the time you're just like bummed because you're like, oh man, I thought I looked way cooler than I actually looked.
yeah.
And how are they using that footage?
So I think it even starts when they're kids, like their parents and their coaches. They all got cameras on the beach, and they're all kind of panning around, and they're picking apart different parts of their surfing and just being like, okay, we have to do this, we have to do this. Um, it's huge. I don't think there's a more important aspect to their whole program, really. Um, and even for myself, I mean, I don't have a ton of footage of myself surfing, but the stuff I do, I'm like, oh shit, like that's how I surf. I'm like, yikes. But it really will help you honestly read a wave better, probably pick a better board. Um, those guys use it. I mean, they're seeing stuff that you would have a real hard time figuring out.
If you were going to give 3 tips to the intermediate surfer, what are the key 3 tips that you would give out?
Um, I
Or
mean,
maybe it
it
might
would,
be 3 things that you're working on yourself, even.
yeah, exactly. It'd be advice I give to myself pretty much every day. Yeah, don't outrun the wave. I think that's probably the biggest thing. That, yeah, you just gotta stay behind it, and attack it from from the back.
Which is
Yeah.
interesting because I think the average, well, depending on where you are in your progression, let's say you're an
Hmm.
early intermediate surfer or
Hmm.
beginner surfer, I think most of those surfers would be terrified to be coming from behind, right? Because they're
Hmm.
so used to not having enough speed to actually make the section. They
Hmm.
being behind the wave would actually mean, oh, it's going to close out and I'm going to not be able to make it, right? But
Yeah,
it's interesting because there's this mental shift that occurs when you're actually trying to do more critical turns where you have to start from coming behind the wave because that's going to put you into the pocket when you place your turn. And
hmm,
I think that transition is something that a lot, it's such a counterintuitive thing to do after you've been
totally.
training yourself to be in front of the wave the whole time so you don't miss out, so you don't get left behind. So
Yeah, that's
it's,
the hardest one.
yeah,
And then
interesting.
having a wave that'll allow you to do that. There's certain, like, that's the hardest thing about surfing Rockaway so much is it's a lot of smaller days where you're just trying to get down the line. There's not much in terms of like you're not taking deep bottom turns to whack the lip. Like if the wave's only like a foot and a half high, you don't really have too much. You're surfing quite laterally rather than top to bottom.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, that's probably the toughest mental thing to figure
Hmm.
out. I remind myself of that every day. And I think yeah, I try to at least think of slowing down a little bit more, less movements. Because if you think about it, you changing the angles, it decreases the efficiency of your board and of the movement most of the time. Like if you're hopping around all weird, like doing this in the water, you're you know slowing yourself down, and it just looks bad, which I do a ton of. But yeah, just big moves and are just holding lines is really, I guess, when they say like, yeah, hold the line, like that's what they're talking about.
Yeah. So stillness and just taking your time. And it's so
Yeah.
interesting because I feel like so much of surfing is actually like slowing down as well, right? Like when John reads a wave, like it's going in slow motion to him compared to us. We're just like freaking out. Are we going to make the wave? But because he's been in that situation so many times, he's a lot more relaxed and he's able to be a lot more thoughtful. Oh, I'm going to place my bottom turn right here, and then I'm going to do my top turn right here. And it's just a lot slower, so he can relax into it. And his style is so much more fluid as a result of that too, right? And powerful. So
yeah, that's where all that experience really comes in. Is just yeah, like it's a cool feeling when you're doing a bottom turn or you faded a little bit and you're like, oh man, I'm just gonna absolutely try and go to town on this next section. I mean, most of the time you just totally blow it, but it's a fun feeling to be like, okay, this is how it's gonna go.
Last tip, any more? One last final one?
I don't know. Pay your photographers, pay your videographers. Relationships are super important in this industry, and I mean, just in general. I mean, it's just good to have a good relationship with people you like to surf with and people you like to be around.
All right, don't be an ass. Sounds like
Yeah.
that's the big thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and just never paddle to the peak, ever.
Oh,
Ever,
right.
just ever.
Never.
Yeah, even if you're by yourself, don't even
Not
even
by
think
yourself.
about it.
Not
Yeah,
even
not
by
even by
yourself.
yourself. No, just let a couple go.
All right. All right, man.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great couple minutes, and I'm glad I got to share and hear some stories from you. And thanks for joining us. And hopefully we'll have you back sometime. And thanks again, Joey. I'll see you later.
Yeah, thank you. I'll probably have the same tips because I'll still be doing the same things. Right on. Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's Van. Hopefully you've been enjoying the podcast. Hopefully you've been listening to some good stories, getting some good tips that are helping you improve as a surfer. If so, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review. It'll only take you literally a few seconds, and share it with your friends. That's the best way you can support me so I can continue to create awesome new content for you. So thanks.